Hello and welcome to another AppSmith Books video for the AppSmith Books channel. My name is Nick Smith. I'm the author of Programming Swift and the older series of books, Xcode Primer. Today I'm going to be talking about touring Xcode to give you a visual guide of the actual Xcode IDE, the application that builds applications. This is the Xcode application itself, and we're going to have a quick guided tour of this. In most of my Programming Swift books, I introduce readers to Xcode for the first time, and I include a visual guide that does take up a whole chapter in the book. So in future, I'm going to start referring people to this video guide. Now, having said that, let's move along. When you start Xcode, this is Xcode version 7.31. Each time you start Xcode, you will be presented with this welcome screen as long as you keep this check mark in place down here. This area over here is the recent project menu. Now, as you start to build your Xcode projects, this will fill up with a list of projects that you can get easy access to by clicking on the listed project over here. If you're starting afresh over here, you can choose to get started with a playground. Then you've also got create a new Xcode project, and you can also check out an existing project if you have one stored in a repository such as a Git. If you have a project somewhere else on disk that's not listed in your recent project, you can click down here and go hunting for a project down there. So let's just take a look at that again. We're going to start here, and first of all, we're going to take a look at how to get started with a playground. Now click here, and this pops up. Now this is what a new playground looks like. Here you've got to supply a name for the playground, and you have a platform to choose from. Now the platform affects the import statement for the first playground file. Now what that means is if you want to work on some things that are found in the iOS frameworks UI kit, then you will include iOS here for the platform and hit next, and your playground will then be based on the Swift programming language, the foundation framework, and the frameworks available to iOS. If you want to do that for tvOS, same thing. Choose it here, next, and you're starting off with a playground project that's capable of reproducing some tvOS features. Now I'm going to choose OS X. Hit next here. Now what I like to do when I start off a new book, I like to keep all of these projects together in one folder. So here I have Finder open. This is my home directory. Now just for this one video, I'm going to create a new folder that's similar to the video title. We're going to call this Touring Xcode, and we're going to spell that right like that, or even like that. There. Now we have one folder that's going to collect all of the demo projects that we make in this video. So back here now, I'm going to select my home folder, and there's the new Touring Xcode folder. Click Create. Excuse me. And now we have our OS X based playground. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail with playgrounds, but I will tell you that if you want, we have this book available, Programming Swift Playgrounds, and this is absolutely free of charge. And I mean really free, without any loopholes or gotchas or anything like that. If you pop over to our homepage and write AppSmith like this, and then .dk, here we have the first screen of the AppSmith Books homepage. And here we have an advertisement for playgrounds here, and you can also get to it by the books menu, and then you'll hit the books description page here, and here on this link download the EPUB version right here. Now this is no strings attached, just click on it and down comes the EPUB file. If you prefer to read your ebooks in Amazon Kindle, on the Amazon Kindle device or in the Amazon Kindle app for your Mac, then you can get the Amazon version of Programming Swift Playgrounds by following this link, or just search for it on any Amazon store. It will cost you $99, 99 cents US to get the book. The Kindle platform will charge that small fee for distribution. So that book, let's just open that, have a quick look inside, and as you can see in here, it goes into a lot of detail of how to use Playgrounds. So that's why I won't cover Playgrounds in this video. Get the book, it is absolutely free. It's up to date with Xcode 7 and Swift 2, and shows you many of the features available to Playgrounds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this back here and show you what a Playground file looks like once you've saved it. So here we have a file in the Touring Xcode folder. It's called myplayground.playground. You can then open this by double clicking on the file. And that's how a Playground works. So I'm going to close Find It Out, and now we're going to go back to Xcode. Now we're going to take a proper project and look at what you've got to do here. If you didn't see what I did there, it's back here, and here you're now going to choose Create a New Xcode Project. Now this is the one that lets you build iPhone, iPad, Mac OS, tvOS and watch apps. So click on that one, and you've got the categories up here. You've got iOS for your iPhone and your iPad. You've got watchOS, tvOS and OS X. Now this is Xcode 7.3, and I expect this to change to macOS when the Xcode 8 application is released. You can filter the types of applications you're going to build here by choosing application or framework and library or system plugin. Now we're going to choose a Cocoa application. Now Cocoa is the fun and friendly name for the AppKit selection of frameworks for building Mac applications. You can also choose a game, and you can also choose command line tools that will run in terminal. So we're going to choose a Cocoa application and hit next. Now on this screen here, you have to give the project a name, and you have some details about yourself and your organization. And here you can see that the bundle identifier, this will be the application that makes it, the identifier that makes your application unique, and it's in reverse. So here we've got organization. This is usually your home page. If you don't have one, don't worry about it, just make something up in this field. Here we're going to say test project 1 like this, and then you can see the bundle identifier is a combination of the product name and your organization identifier. So mine becomes DK AppSmith Test Project 1. Here we've got the language Swift. You can choose Swift or Objective-C. All of our books from now on will be in the Swift language. And storyboards. You can choose to not use storyboards, and that will mean using the older nib or zip files instead of storyboards. But storyboards are the way forward when building Mac applications. You can create a document-based application, which it's a little bit more of an advanced subject, and we're not going to cover that in this tour of the Xcode IDE. Core data, if you want to use core data in your application, include a check mark there, and it will include the frameworks for accessing and using core data as a backing store for database type applications and things like that. But here we have the basic information ready for a test demo app. So we're going to hit next, And now again, where do we save it? We're going to keep using this one file here, or one folder I should say, touring Xcode that we created in my home folder. Nick, touring Xcode, create. And there we have it. This is your new Xcode project ready for work. And if we go and look at the Finder application again now, you can see that it has created a single folder in this touring Xcode folder. That means it keeps everything together in this one folder. When we take a quick look inside that, we have a project file. Now the project file knows all about the contents of this file. And if we take a look at the content here, we can see we have an app delegate Swift file and a view controller Swift file. These are the basic source code files for the application. The info plist file is where the user defaults are stored and things like that, with metadata about the application. And then you've got some other support files for things like assets, visual assets like icons and artwork, and the base language for the user interface. You'll get more of these folders if you start doing localization, but the base is the folder that creates all of the resources in the main language. Now, going back out, this is the file that you would double click on to open the project into Xcode if you were opening from Finder. Now, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of Xcode 8, currently in beta 2. Just to show you that this video does have some longevity. The title of the video on our YouTube channel is Touring Xcode 7 and 8. And it's just to show you that you can use this video. The layout of Xcode is not going to change that much when Xcode 8 gets released. If I just look at my applications here I have the Xcode 8 beta. When I start this up, you'll see it's almost exactly the same. We have the welcome screen that comes in here. Here we have version 8 beta 2. You've got the check mark down here that keeps this welcome screen in place every time you start up. We've got the same project options here. We can get started with the playground, we can create a new Xcode project, and we can check out an existing source code Git repository style project. Here we have the two items that we created earlier in Xcode 7. They show up here, and you can also go down here and open another project. So it's exactly the same. What we'll do now is we'll just create a new Xcode project from here in Xcode 8 beta. And you'll see that the options are basically the same. Now they have actually changed to Mac OS over here instead of OS X, so we're going to choose application, again Cocoa application, and next. And I'm going to make a little note in the project name that this is Xcode 8 project test here, so I know the difference, because one of the main differences from an Xcode 7 to an Xcode 8 project is the Swift language and the way that Xcode 8 will import framework features into the Swift language. So there's a big, huge difference, a game-changing and a code-breaking change coming up. So I hit next there again to our Xcode touring project folder and just click create there. I didn't mention it in the first part of the video that if you do set a check mark here, you will be creating a Git repository instead of a file-based project. We might come back to that later, but for now we're just going to do file-based project, which creates the folder. So I'm going to hit create here, and we're getting a new project. Quick look in Finder again, touring Xcode. And here we have this new project here, exactly the same. So you can use this video for both Xcode 7 and Xcode 8. And then in a moment, I'm going to switch back to Xcode 7. I probably shouldn't show too much about the Xcode interface right now for the version 8 beta, but it is almost identical. the major changes that are going to affect Xcode 8 will be the way that the Swift language interacts with the various frameworks that support all of your Apple project types. Okay, time to look at the main Xcode IDE when you're building an Xcode project and not a playground. Now, I'm going to go back to Xcode 7 here, 7.3, and I'm going to open the first test project that we made earlier and saved in our Touring Xcode folder. So click on that, and this is the main Xcode IDE. When you first open Xcode with a new project, you will see this project settings panel open in the main editor. Just to make sure we're on the same page here. These view controls up at the top, I'm going to activate them all. You can see that they're active when they are highlighted blue. These give you a general idea of the basic Xcode layout. In the middle here you have the main editor, and down at the bottom you have the debug and output panel. On the right you have the utilities panel, and on the left we have the navigator panel. Now each of these panels are controlled by these view controls here in the main toolbar. So this demonstrates the right panel, which is the utilities panel, navigator panel, debug and output. So let's switch all of those off for a second, just so we can see what Xcode looks like when they're all off. They're all off and hidden, and that's what Xcode looks like now. Now you'll use the navigator panel for finding your way around in your project, and this is the main editor now. And if I select a source code file, you'll see that this will change. So this gets updated according to what we click on over here. So I click on App Delegate Swift, and now we're in a source code editor. Going back to where we were before, we have the project settings. Now you can see the project settings opens this panel where we can make various changes to how the application runs. It has things like the deployment target. If this should target OS 10 version 10.11 and newer, that's fine here. If you want it to, if you want your application to target older versions of OS 10, then you can go and select a version down here. This part, main interface, is telling you which file is storing the application interface for this project. And that means this one is storing main.storyboard, and you can see that that file is over here. So when I click on main.storyboard there, we can now see that this is the application interface for this project. This is the toolbar, this is the window controller, and this is the view that gets loaded into the window controller. This panel here shows the document hierarchy or outline. Each of these lists what objects are available in these so-called scenes. Remember now you're in a storyboard, so we have application scenes. Now you can hide that with this button down here to get rid of that. And we are now looking at the main storyboard. Now the main storyboard you can double click on to zoom out like that and get an overview. And then if you want to zoom in on a particular scene in the storyboard, you can just double click on a scene and it then becomes the active scene. Each panel, I'll bring up all the panels again. Now we are in storyboard and interface builder. When that particular file is selected, this is where you would lay out buttons and things like that on the various views and add toolbars to the window and things like that. But yeah, as you can see, everything is context sensitive, so that if I select a file over here, it changes the editor here, and that in turn changes what is available in the utility panel over here. So I'm just going to hide that utility panel again. We'll come back to that later. And I'm going to hide the debug panel over here. And we're just going to look at the project navigator for now. This first panel, like all the panels really, has its own set of toolbar icons. So all of these icons belong to the navigator panel over here. And we can navigate around here and we are in file and folder view in the project navigator. So this is showing you the actual files that make up the project. Then we've got the symbol navigator, which shows the various classes and methods of the classes that are in the project right now. We can search for things. We've got the issue navigator, so if you get a warning or an error, we can click on this and get a list of issues and warnings in the project. We got various things for getting around in the project, and this is like your debugging breakpoint panel over here. Well, getting back to File Navigator, Assets is for app icons and artwork, etc. You've got that info plist we discussed earlier that gets saved in that in the project file. We've got the main storyboard, which houses all the visual elements of the application. And down here in the project folder, or products folder I should say, when you build and run this application, this gets compiled, and this is the actual app. So here we've got the main Xcode toolbar. Here you've got this play button here, which builds and runs an app. And then you've got the stop buttons where you can stop an app. Now this one is something similar to crashing an app. So when you, let's just give it a try. We'll hit play and run this app. It doesn't do anything right now. It just starts up with a window and a blank view. And yeah, nothing can really be done with it. You can hide it, you can quit it. It's got a fully capable menu. This is the app, and this is the app's menu up here. If I hit the red button right now, it will just hide this window, or it will close the window, but it won't close down the app. You see, it's still over here in the in the dock, and you can stop the app with this button. But like I said, that is the same as actually crashing the app, and some things shouldn't be done that way. And the books, all of the books, especially Mac Apps 1, will tell you a lot more about that and how to quit apps gracefully. Each editor has a jump bar. So if I go down and select a file, you get the jump bar here that you can also use to navigate around and select files. So you can switch to a file here using the jump bar. If I go down and look at the storyboard, you see the jump bar has changed again. And that is how the Navigator panel works. It's for navigating your way around your project. And if you're going to be spending a long time in a particular file, for example, we jump over to the view controller Swift file, and we're going to be writing a lot of code in here, then it might be a good idea on a small Mac to just hide that Navigator panel so you can concentrate on the code and get a lot more screen space to work in. Right, now we're going to take a look at the utility panel. Now, it's the best way to demonstrate that is to actually select the main storyboard file that has the application user interface here, and here and over here, sorry, we have the utility panel open. Now I can hide that Navigator panel here so we can see more of the screen, and this is the utility panel, and again it has the various icons at the top, and you will use a lot of these when you're doing visual programming, working with buttons, etc. You've got some information about the file that is currently selected, and this is the identity inspector. So when you click on an object in the storyboard, right now we have the main view controller selected here. Then you can go over and select the identity inspector, and that will tell you about the class, and you'll use this a lot when you're creating custom classes for objects. So you can create a custom class as a source code file, select an object, and then change that object's controlling class in this section here. So when I select this blue icon here, if I were to change out the controlling class here, I would be able to find it in the list of classes that are available. And these are the framework classes, all of those that begin with NS, and your own custom classes will come somewhere in the list, which is sorted alphabetically. Now, if we take a look down here, you can see that the utility panel is actually split. There are two panels within this utility panel area, and this is the library panel. Now, the library panel has a file library where you can drag new files into your project. So if I just open the Navigator here, you can see here we have a Swift file here. I could drag that over and drop it into the project here. You get to name it and say let's call this my Swift file. So there we have a Swift file here. It's empty, and then you can go ahead and create a class or do something like that. Over here we have the code snippet library on this second panel, and the code snippet library lets you drag in code snippets. These are items of code that are saved. So we can look at this, click on it once, and you get a description and a title, and you can create your own code snippets as well. If we go through the list and find a Swift for statement, and we can drag that into the file, and then you just remove these highlighted items and create your own code. So we could say, for example, for X, and give it a range 0 through 10, and then we could write a statement that, for example, prints X when it runs. Now we're getting an error here because we've put this code as a top level piece of code, and it's not a great place for a Swift code for a Swift code example. But it's just to give you an idea of how the code snippets work. And like I said, you can create your own. Now we go back to the storyboard over here. You then have the object library. And the object library has all the visual objects that you can add to a project. So now we're going to add a button here, and it's as simple as dragging it in, and we're going to scroll down and find a label, and now we have a label. And you can use the grab handles when you select an item to arrange them on screen and make them bigger or smaller and things like that. Here we have the media library that will give you access to sounds and video and graphics, etc. Now, going back to the top part, I'll just run this down here. When you have an object selected, we have the identity inspector, as we mentioned before, that tells you about the class, etc. This is the attributes inspector. This gives you the attributes for the selected item. In this case, we have a button, and we can see that down here we have the button's title, for example. So if I say something like say hello, when I hit enter, it changes the button's title text. And you can do that for any of the selected items. And again, these are context sensitive, so depending on what this object can do, the attributes will change depending on what you click on. So these are the basics of the utility panel. You'll use this a lot when creating visual UI-based applications for creating objects, setting various attributes of objects, naming objects, etc. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we got this debug and output panel down here. I'm not going to cover that in this video. I'm probably, when I get time, I'm probably going to make a separate video for the basics of debugging, which will accompany several chapters in several of the Programming Swift series books. So I'm just going to close that one for now. And now we're going to take a look at something called the Assistant Editor. So we're going to get rid of that panel over there. Here we have now our main storyboard open. I'm going to also close the Navigator Panel, and we're going to take this button here. This is the Show Assistant Editor button. Now what happens when I click on this is it splits the screen. So you have the main editor over here, which is currently displaying the main.storyboard file, which contains the application UI. And Xcode will try to open the corresponding class file to a selected object. So right now we're looking at the main view controller, and we have the button and the label we created earlier, and this is the supporting class file for this visual representation of the view controller. So up here we have the class view controller, and this is a subclass of NS view controller. Now the assistant editor is great for making these connections between the visual objects and the actual code. Now as you know, we can't do anything without code, so this button needs code and this label also needs code. Now the way that you create these code elements using Assistant Editor is fantastically simple. All you have to do is select a visual object, and then you can control click or right click and then drag. If you have right click set up, then you can just hold down your right cursor button and drag over to the corresponding code file, in this case viewcontroller.swift, and then release your cursor when you get this little symbol up saying insert, outlet or action. So I'm going to release this. Now a button is usually used for an action, but it can also be an outlet, and an action creates a function that does something. Now you're going to need to go up and select action here, like that, to create a function that does something. Now I like to use a 3-letter acronym for the name, so BTN, which means button, and this button is going to say hello. So you just write say hello there. Now you can either strongly type this function. In other words, there is a parameter that's going to be passed into this function when it gets called, and that parameter is the object that triggered this function. Now I can strongly type this to NS button so that I can easily get hold of any properties of this button, or I can just leave it at any object if I don't really intend to interact with the object that triggered this view event. But just for this case, I'll go down and select NS button here, and then I'll click connect, and we'll see what that looks like. So here we have a function. It starts here with the word function button say hello, and it has this sender parameter, and that is where we just changed it from any object to NS button. Because we created it in Assistant Editor, it has this keyword IB action, which lets the Xcode interface builder know that this type of function can indeed be connected to a visual object in the storyboard. Now we're going to do the same thing again for the label. I'm going to start over here. Then I'm going to control click or right click and drag another connection over to this this class file, and it has to be within the boundaries of the class, in between the keyword class that names the class and the closing curly brace that defines the scope of the class. So we're going to release it here below that function, and this time I'm going to let the connection type, I'm going to let that stay as an outlet, and an outlet creates a class property. And then we're going to just give this another one, another name here. I'm going to say LBL for label, and just type the word message like this. And this is typed to NX text field, and according to the rules of ARC, it is going to be a weak reference. So we don't need to worry too much about those parts. I'm just going to click connect here, and we now have a variable called LBL message of type NX text field. again, it's got this prefix IB, interface builder outlet, just like this was IB, as in interface builder action. And this keyword weak means that this will be the second reference to this variable in the class. The actual storyboard, which has drawn the label on screen in the view controller, contains the first reference to it, so any second references will be weak. Now, what can we do with this code once we've written it, or once we created it? Well, we in the action that can generate some activity within the view, we can say, for example, I want that label message to display some text when we click on this button. So we just write it out like this, and we'll write the typical hello world here, and then we'll give this project a run now and see what happens when we click on this button. The app starts up and we click here, and we do indeed see hello world appear. Now we're going to hit that red button there and then come up here and stop the app. Now I mentioned earlier that you can strongly type this sender object, and that means defining the type of object that has triggered this function. So sender is a parameter, and it is sender that we can now access here. So I could add on to this string by using the plus symbol here, and then say sender like this, and then I can then access the various elements of this button, because sender is a direct reference to that button. And the sender.title is this text that is on the button. So I could just say from here, or from, like that. And then what will happen now is that when we click the button, it will say hello world from say hello. So we'll just try that again. And we click the button. Hello world from say hello. And there you have it. That is Assistant Editor. And that is that button here. If you want to get back to the regular editor, you just click here and you're back. So, just to recap before we round this video off, this is the Xcode application. It's called an IDE, an Integrated Development Environment. We have the Navigator panel over here, and if we switch on the Utility panel over here and the Debug and Output panel over here, that is the main editor in the middle with all of the panels open at once. The utility panel is used for inspecting and changing object parameters. You've got the identity inspector, we've got the attributes inspector, and that can change things like text alignment and font size, etc. in there. Buttons can be, you can actually change how a button functions over here, which the style of the button, for example. We've got the size inspector at the top here, which can change the size of a button. We have the connections inspector. This one shows you what various elements are connected to. If I select the view controller file up here, you can see that those two connections we made earlier in Assistant Editor, we connected an outlet label, and we call that code connection label message. That's here, and then we've got this section called received actions. There you can see there is a connection from the visual button element to the code. That's listed down here. One thing that does happen a lot to newbie developers and and veteran developers alike is that when you use Assistant Editor to create a connection to something, I'll just put in another, I'll quickly put in another button down here so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Here we have a button now. I'll close the utility panel. Now I'm going to go and create another connection to the class file like this, like we did earlier. Now what I really want is an action, but all too often I will, and you will forget to change this to an action type. So here we have a button just called button, and what you would want to do is go up here and change to action, but all too often you will forget to do that. I do it all the time, you will too. Click connect and we get this outlet where we should have had this action method. So we've got a property, and you can see when you hover your mouse cursor over these dots in the Assistant Editor gutter, you can see what objects these code elements are connected to. So the obvious thing to do now here is get rid of this and try that again. So I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to go back to this button, and I'm going to drag in button, and just call that button 2, and then change this action, and then click connect. Now I have the correct connection, but all too often Storyboard will not, the Storyboard and Interface Builder will not register that accidental outlet I created earlier. That won't be cleared out completely. So if I hit run now, we might just see a message down here in the debug and output area telling us that something's wrong, and there it is, and it says failed to connect a button outlet from the test project 1 view controller to NS button, missing set or instance variable. So what that actually means is there is some information still in the storyboard that says this button is connected to an outlet. I'm just going to stop that properly up there. Now I'm going to get rid of the Assistant Editor again by clicking here. I'm back in the regular editor, and now I'm going to open the utility panel, and we have this button here called the Connections Inspector. Now if I scroll down here and make sure I have the whole view controller class selected, you can see that this very first item, instead of a connection dot here that shows a proper connection, like all of these do, we have this one with a tiny faded exclamation mark, and that means that there is a connection mentioned in the storyboard file that isn't properly connected. So we can just get rid of that on this delete button over here, like that, and that problem should now be gone, so that when we run this application one more time, this message should disappear completely, and the and this little demo app will compile without any problems. And there it is. So that's the end of this video. Remember, feel free to experiment with these buttons up here. You will not break Xcode and you will not break your project by using these buttons. All they do is show and hide the various panels that are available while you're working. Debug utility panel, debug and output panel. We've got the utility panel over here that is split with the library panel in the bottom, where you've got lots of visual controls that can relate to a project. We have the Navigator panel over here for looking at the various files that make up a project, and we have the main Xcode toolbar up here with the run and the stop button. We have this special little button set up here for selecting a different target and schemes, and we have the output and feedback panel up here, which shows you what the application is doing as it's running. And if we do make a code error, let's just make one there, you can see that we get these various errors popping up, and this clicking on this symbol here will take you to the errors that are in the various code files if they crop up. The main editors also have a so-called jump bar. These are, of course, toolbars around on the various panels. But if we open the assistant editor here, now we have two code files open. We'll get rid of everything else just like that. You can see that the main editor has its own jump bar over here, and you can now work in split screen mode by activating the assistant editor, and that also has a jump bar for jumping around to various code files. And that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. I will refer to this video from several of the Programming Swift books. So instead of me using up a couple of chapters and a lot of graphics to demonstrate all this, I'm just going to tell you to go and visit the AppSmith Books channel on YouTube, where you can see these videos and get a good idea of what the introductory chapters of the books will be covering. So thanks for now, and have a great day.